Ray Donovan's world was falling apart piece by piece. The cold hospital lights buzzed overhead as he watched his 9-year-old daughter Lily sleep. Her small body connected to machines that beeped in a steady rhythm. Her face was pale, much too pale for a child who used to run around the backyard chasing butterflies just 6 months ago. The doctors had explained it to him 3 times now, but he still struggled to wrap his head around it. Lily had a rare blood disorder that was attacking her from the inside out. Her body was essentially fighting against itself, and she was losing the battle day by day. "Mr. Donovan?" The soft voice of Dr. Chen broke through his thoughts. "Do you have a moment?" Ray nodded and followed the doctor into the hallway, closing Lily's door gently behind him. The circles under his eyes told the story of countless sleepless nights spent researching, calling specialists, and praying for a miracle. "I've received word from the research hospital in Boston," Dr. Chen said, keeping her voice low. "They've developed a new treatment that might help Lily. The results from their initial trials are promising. Very promising." For the first time in months, Ray felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. "That's amazing news. When can we start?" Dr. Chen's expression shifted, and Ray knew what was coming before she even opened her mouth. It always came down to this. The treatment is still experimental. Insurance won't cover it. She paused, clearly uncomfortable with what she had to say next. The total cost would be around $2 million. The hope that had momentarily lifted Ray's spirits came crashing down. $2 million. It might as well have been $2 billion. As a former security specialist now working as a night guard at a local warehouse, he barely made enough to cover their apartment rent and the mounting hospital bills that insurance did cover. "How long does she have without the treatment?" Ray asked, his voice barely a whisper. 3 months, maybe 4. "The disease is progressing faster than we anticipated." Ray thanked Dr. Chen and returned to Lily's room, taking his usual spot in the chair beside her bed. He reached out and held her small hand, careful not to disturb the IV line. Lily's eyes fluttered open. "Dad?" she murmured, her voice weak but her smile still bright enough to light up the room. "Did you bring the book?" Ray reached into his worn backpack and pulled out The Secret Garden, their current bedtime story. "Right here, kiddo. Ready to find out what happens next?" Lily nodded eagerly and Ray began to read, his deep voice filling the sterile hospital room with tales of magic and healing. As he read, his mind was racing, calculating. The modest college fund he'd started for Lily, gone. His 401k emptied. The small life insurance policy left by his late wife, used up for the initial treatments. After Lily fell back asleep, Ray stepped out of the hospital into the cool night air. He pulled out his phone and made yet another call to his bank, hoping for a miracle with his loan application. The answer was the same as the last 3 times. "I'm sorry, Mr. Donovan, but with your current financial situation and credit score, we simply cannot approve a loan of that size." Next came the crowdfunding attempt. Ray had reluctantly created a page sharing Lily's story, something that went against every private bone in his body. But pride had no place when his daughter's life was on the line. After 2 weeks, they'd raised $37,000, an incredible amount from generous strangers and every friend they had, but nowhere near what they needed. Ray's apartment felt empty without Lily. Photos of her covered the walls. Lily at the beach building sandcastles. Lily on her first day of school. Lily with her mother before cancer took her 3 years ago. In one corner sat Lily's collection of plants. She had inherited her mother's green thumb. Even from her hospital bed, she gave Ray strict instructions on how to water each one. "They're still alive because they're fighters, Dad," she had told him seriously, "just like me." Ray sat at his kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee, surrounded by hospital bills and rejection letters from charities that were already overextended. His laptop was open to an article about Victor Harrington, the reclusive tech billionaire whose company had revolutionized medical imaging technology. The article mentioned Harrington's upcoming charity gala, ironically raising money for children's health research. $2 million was pocket change to someone like Harrington, who was worth billions. Ray had written letters, made calls, even tried to reach out through Harrington's foundation. All he'd received were polite form responses from assistants. Ray's phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. Lily's latest blood work showed further deterioration. Time was running out. Something inside Ray shifted that night. The desperation that had been building for months crystallized into determination. As a former security specialist, he had worked for high-profile clients installing and testing systems designed to keep people out. He knew how they worked, knew their weaknesses. He opened a new browser tab and began researching Victor Harrington more thoroughly. Unlike most billionaires who kept their assets in offshore accounts and investments, Harrington was known to be old-fashioned in certain ways. Rumors in security circles suggested he kept significant assets in his mansion, specifically in a custom-built safe room. "It's just wrong," Ray whispered to the empty kitchen. "One man has more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, while a little girl dies because her dad can't afford to save her." Ray had never broken the law, not even a parking ticket in the last 5 years. He'd served his country in the military, paid his taxes, volunteered at Lily's school. He was, by all accounts, a good man caught in an impossible situation. The next morning, Ray visited Lily early, bringing her favorite strawberry milkshake snuck in from the diner across the street. Her face lit up when she saw him, but he couldn't miss how the simple act of sitting up in bed left her winded. "Dad, can we go to the park when I get better?" she asked between sips. "I miss the ducks." "Of course we can, sweetheart," Ray promised, his heart breaking. "We'll feed them every day if you want." After leaving the hospital, instead of going home, Ray drove to the wealthy neighborhood where Victor Harrington's estate sprawled across 5 acres. He parked his beat-up truck several blocks away and walked, just another service worker in this land of luxury. He observed the property from a respectful distance, noting the security cameras, the patrol pattern of the guards, the delivery schedule. For the next week, Ray lived a double life. By day, he was the devoted father, reading to Lily, bringing her little gifts, and discussing her treatment with doctors as though there was still hope of affording it. By night, he was planning what he knew would either save his daughter or cost him everything. He learned that Harrington was hosting his annual charity gala in 10 days. The mansion would be filled with guests, the security focused on the crowded areas rather than the private wings. It was the only window Ray would get. On his next visit to Lily, he found her drawing a picture. "Look, Dad," she said proudly, holding up the crayon drawing. "It's you and me in the garden we're going to have someday. Mom's watching over us as an angel." Ray felt tears sting his eyes as he looked at the simple drawing. 3 stick figures, one with wings floating above a house with flowers. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. We'll frame it." That night, Ray made his final decision. He would take only what he needed for Lily's treatment, not a dollar more. And somehow, someday he would pay it back. He wasn't a thief. He was a father who had run out of options. As the day of the gala approached, Ray prepared methodically. He purchased equipment with cash from different stores across the city. He studied blueprints of similar mansions built by the same architect. He created a detailed timeline that would give him exactly 15 minutes to get in and out of the safe room. The night before the planned break-in, Ray sat by Lily's bedside. She had taken a turn for the worse, her breathing more labored, her usually cheerful demeanor subdued by pain and medication. "You know I'd do anything for you, right?" Ray whispered as she slept. "Anything in this world." Lily stirred slightly, her eyes opening just a crack. "I know, Dad," she murmured. "You're my hero." Ray left the hospital with her words echoing in his mind. Heroes were supposed to do the right thing. Was what he was planning, right? He didn't know anymore. All he knew was that without the treatment, his daughter would die, and he couldn't let that happen. Not when he had the skills to do something about it. As dawn broke, Ray knelt beside his bed and did something he hadn't done since his wife died. He prayed. Not for forgiveness for what he was about to do, but for the strength to do it. "I don't know if you're listening," he whispered, "but please, please don't take her too. I'll face whatever consequences come my way. Just let her live." The die was cast. In less than 18 hours, Ray Donovan would attempt to break into the home of one of the richest men in the country. His goal wasn't greed or revenge, it was $2 million to save the only thing in this world that mattered to him. His little girl. The night of Victor Harrington's charity gala arrived with a sky full of stars that seemed to mock Ray's darkness. He parked his truck 3 blocks away from the mansion, in a spot he had carefully selected for its lack of security cameras. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was about to rob a charity event, where the wealthy congratulated themselves on their generosity. Ray checked his watch. 8:45 p.m. The gala would be in full swing now. with waiters circulating champagne and hors d'oeuvres among guests who probably spent more on their outfits than Ray made in a year. He opened the duffel bag on the passenger seat and reviewed his equipment one last time. Black clothing, gloves, a small set of specialized tools, a communication jammer, and a flashlight with a red filter to preserve his night vision without being easily spotted. He also carried something that no professional thief would, a handwritten note in his pocket. "I'm taking only what I need to save my daughter's life. $2 million. I will repay this. I swear on her life." It was foolish, he knew. Evidence. But Ray couldn't bring himself to be just a thief in the night. His phone buzzed. A text from Nancy, the night nurse who had grown fond of Lily. "She's asking for you. Fever's up again." Ray's jaw tightened. "Tell her I'm getting her medicine. I'll be there soon." It wasn't entirely a lie. He slipped out of the truck and began walking casually toward the Harrington estate. He wasn't taking the direct route. That would look suspicious. Instead, he meandered as if he were just a local out for an evening stroll, gradually making his way closer to his target. The Harrington mansion loomed ahead, its windows glowing with warm light. Luxury cars lining the circular driveway. Security was visible at the main entrance. Men in black suits with earpieces checking invitations. But Ray wasn't headed for the front door. His research had revealed a weakness in the property's northeastern corner, where the dense landscaping provided cover, and a maintenance access point offered a way onto the grounds. As a security expert, Ray had often told clients that their greatest vulnerabilities weren't their technology, but their routines and assumptions. At 9:02 p.m., Ray slipped through a gap in the hedges and onto the sprawling grounds. He activated the small signal jammer that would create a blind spot in the security camera coverage for approximately 20 feet around him. It wouldn't trigger alarms. It would simply appear as momentary static, something easily attributed to technical glitches. Ray moved with purpose but without rushing, staying in shadows, his steps silent on the manicured lawn. His military training and years in security work made his movements efficient and confident. This wasn't the desperate scramble of an amateur. It was the calculated precision of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. As he approached the eastern wing of the mansion, Ray caught sight of a service entrance, the one used by catering staff and other workers supporting the gala. He had timed his arrival perfectly. A catering van was parked nearby, and workers were busy unloading additional trays of food. In the hustle and confusion, one more person in dark clothing wouldn't stand out. Ray slipped in behind a young man struggling with a heavy tray. He even reached out to steady it, earning a grateful nod before continuing into the service corridor. The staff was too focused on their tasks to question his presence. Inside, the noise of the gala provided perfect cover. Laughter, clinking glasses, and live string music echoing through the mansion. Ray moved deeper into the house, away from the public areas. He had memorized the layout based on architectural plans of similar mansions and information gleaned from service workers' social media posts. According to his research, Harrington's private office and safe room were located in the west wing, separated from the main entertaining spaces. As Ray made his way there, he passed artwork worth more than his lifetime earnings hanging casually on walls, antique furniture that museums would covet, and displays of technology that hadn't even reached the market yet. A security guard turned a corner ahead. Ray didn't panic or hide, that would look suspicious. Instead, he pretended to adjust a thermostat on the wall, looking annoyed as if he'd been sent to fix it. The guard gave him a passing glance but continued on his patrol route. People rarely questioned someone who acted like they belonged. At 9:17 p.m., Ray reached the corridor leading to Harrington's private office. This would be the first real test. The door would have a security system beyond a simple lock. He pulled out a small electronic device he'd assembled himself, designed to mimic the frequency of Harrington's security fobs. It was a gamble. If Harrington had upgraded to the newest biometric systems, Ray's plan would fail right here. The device blinked green. The door unlocked with a soft click. Ray slipped inside, closing the door behind him. The office was dimly lit by the glow of computer monitors. It was surprisingly modest compared to the opulence of the rest of the house. Functional, focused, the space of someone who actually worked rather than just displayed their wealth. But Ray wasn't here for the office. His target lay behind another door on the far wall, the entrance to Harrington's private vault. This would be the real challenge. No billionaire left their vault with just an electronic lock. The vault door was concealed behind a sliding bookshelf, a classic hiding spot that didn't surprise Ray. What did surprise him was the security system. It wasn't the cutting-edge technology he had expected, but an old-school mechanical combination lock alongside a digital keypad. Harrington apparently believed in redundancy and the unpredictability of analog systems in a digital age. Ray studied the lock carefully. The mechanical system was a high-end model he recognized. He'd worked with them before. The digital system would be harder but not impossible. He pulled out a small device and attached it to the keypad. It would cycle through common combinations based on algorithms, a brute force approach that would take time. While the device worked on the digital lock, Ray focused on the mechanical one. He removed a stethoscope-like tool from his bag and placed it against the safe, listening carefully for the telltale clicks as he slowly turned the dial. This was the art of safe cracking, part science, part intuition, part patience. Minutes ticked by. Sweat beaded on Ray's forehead despite the cool air of the office. Every moment he remained increased the risk of discovery. The distant sounds of the gala continued, but for how long? When would someone notice his intrusion? At 9:36 p.m., the mechanical lock yielded with a satisfying click. Almost simultaneously, the digital device blinked success. Ray removed his tools quickly and pulled the vault door open. The interior was smaller than he had imagined, about the size of a walk-in closet. Inside were shelves of documents, several locked boxes, and a glass display case containing what looked like rare coins or medallions. Along one wall stood a safe with another digital keypad. Ray went straight for the safe, applying the same technique with his electronic device. This lock yielded faster. Harrington apparently used a similar code pattern for both systems, a common security mistake. Inside the safe, Ray found exactly what he was looking for: stacks of bearer bonds and high-denomination cash. Bearer bonds were the perfect target, untraceable, as good as cash but easier to carry. Ray worked quickly, counting out just enough to cover Lily's treatment. $2 million, not a dollar more. As he secured the bonds in a thin pouch under his shirt, Ray's eyes fell on a framed photograph on Harrington's desk that he hadn't noticed before. It showed a younger Victor Harrington with a woman and a small child. They were laughing, looking like any normal family despite their extraordinary wealth. Ray felt an unexpected pang. Harrington wasn't just a faceless billionaire, but a father too. Ray placed his handwritten note in the safe. A foolish gesture perhaps, but he needed to do it. He wasn't a thief. He was a desperate father. He wanted Harrington to know the difference. As Ray carefully closed the safe and began to exit the vault, a sound from the office doorway made his blood freeze. Voices in the hallway getting closer. The door handle turned. Ray slipped behind the large desk just as the door opened. Through the narrow gap between the desk and floor, he could see polished dress shoes enter, 2 pairs. One belonged to a security guard, judging by the uniform pants and sturdy footwear. "Mr. Harrington just likes to check that everything's secure during events, sir," the security guard was saying. "Standard protocol." "Of course," replied the second man, his shoes expensive Italian leather. Victor always was careful with his toys. Ray remained perfectly still, controlling his breathing as the men moved around the office. They were just doing a routine check, not responding to an alarm. But if either of them noticed the vault door was slightly ajar, "All looks normal to me," the guard said after a quick scan. "Shall we head back to the gala?" "Actually, I need to make a quick call. Client in Tokyo won't wait for morning. Do you mind giving me a moment?" The guard hesitated. "Sir, I'm supposed to—" "It's fine, Stevens. Victor and I go back 20 years. I promise not to steal the silverware." The guard reluctantly left, and the well-dressed man immediately went to the bar cart in the corner and poured himself a generous drink. Ray remained frozen, the bearer bonds pressing against his chest, his heart pounding so loudly he was certain it would give him away. The man finished. The fluorescent lights of the hospital seemed harsher than usual as Ray rushed down the corridor toward Lily's room. His daughter's bonds were secured in a small pouch taped to his lower back, an uncomfortable but necessary precaution. The weight of what he'd done pressed on him with each step. But the thought of Lily's smile pushed him forward. Dr. Chen was waiting outside Lily's room, clipboard in hand, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd been on duty far too long. "Mr. Donovan," she said, her voice low. "Lily's fever has stabilized, but her blood counts are still dropping. We need to make a decision about next steps very soon." Ray nodded, his throat tight. "I'd like to speak with you about the treatment in Boston. I can make the payment now." Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't ask questions. In her years of practice, she'd seen many desperate parents move heaven and earth for their children. "Of course. But first, Lily's been asking for you." Ray entered the dim room where his daughter lay curled on her side, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. The soft beeping of monitors created a somber soundtrack to her labored breathing. "Hey, Sunshine," Ray whispered, using the nickname that had followed Lily since she was a toddler with bouncing curls that caught the light. Lily's eyes fluttered open, her smile weak but genuine. "Dad, you came back." "Of course I did." Ray sat carefully on the edge of the bed, taking her small hand in his. "I told you I was getting your medicine, remember?" Lily nodded slowly. "Did you find it?" "I did." Ray swallowed the lump in his throat. "The doctors in Boston are going to help you get better. We're going to go there very soon. Will I still be sick when we go to feed the ducks?" Ray brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "No, Sunshine. You'll be strong enough to throw bread all by yourself." Lily seemed satisfied with this answer and drifted back to sleep, the medication pulling her under. Ray sat with her for nearly an hour, watching the rise and fall of her chest, memorizing every detail of her face. What he had done tonight might mean years away from her. The thought was unbearable, but the alternative, a world without Lily in it, was impossible. When he was certain she was deeply asleep, Ray slipped out to find Dr. Chen. In a quiet consultation room away from the busy nurses' station, he explained that he wanted to proceed with the Boston treatment immediately. "I'll need to make some calls to set things in motion," Dr. Chen said, her professional demeanor masking her curiosity about Ray's sudden financial turn. "The hospital will need the payment processed before they begin preparation for Lily's arrival." "I understand." Ray pulled out a bank card. "I'll make the deposit first thing in the morning when the bank's open." Dr. Chen nodded. "In the meantime, I'll contact Dr. Patel in Boston. If all goes well, we could have Lily transferred within 48 hours. Ray left the consultation room with a strange mixture of hope and dread churning in his stomach. In the hospital cafeteria, he bought a coffee and sat in a corner booth away from the handful of other late-night visitors. He needed to think. The bearer bonds had to be converted to cash, and quickly. He couldn't simply walk into his regular bank with $2 million in bearer bonds without raising every red flag in the system. He needed a quieter option, a bank where he wasn't known, where large cash transactions wouldn't immediately trigger suspicion. As Ray contemplated his next move, a breaking news alert flashed across the cafeteria television. The sound was muted, but the headline made his blood run cold. "Break-in at billionaire Victor Harrington's estate during charity gala." Ray kept his expression neutral as he watched the footage of police cars outside the Harrington mansion, their lights painting the manicured grounds in red and blue. It had taken less than 3 hours for the theft to be discovered, faster than he'd anticipated. The bonds suddenly felt like they were burning against his skin. His phone buzzed with a text from Nancy, the night nurse. "Lily's awake again and asking for you." Ray returned to Lily's room, forcing a smile he didn't feel. He read to her until she fell asleep again, then reluctantly left the hospital. He couldn't risk staying overnight as he sometimes did. If the police were already investigating, they would be checking security footage from the gala. It wouldn't take long for them to notice the extra staff member who didn't belong. The night air was cool as Ray drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, paid cash for a room, and settled in for what he knew would be a sleepless night. On the small television, more news about the break-in trickled in. The amount taken wasn't specified, but the reporter mentioned that valuable financial instruments had been stolen. There was also brief mention of a note left behind, though its contents weren't revealed. By dawn, Ray had formed a plan. He showered, changed into fresh clothes he'd brought from his truck, and headed for a bank in a neighboring town where he'd never done business before. He had rehearsed his story, an inheritance from a privacy-obsessed uncle who had kept his wealth in bearer bonds, hidden away from the financial system he distrusted. The bank manager, a middle-aged woman with a practiced customer service smile, listened to his story with professional interest. Bearer bonds were unusual but not unheard of, especially among the older generation. Ray presented himself as a somewhat confused regular guy who just wanted to deposit his unexpected windfall and set up a wire transfer for his daughter's medical treatment. 2 hours and considerable paperwork later, Ray walked out of the bank with the transaction complete. The money was in his account and the transfer to the Boston Research Hospital was processing. He had done it. Lily would get her treatment. As Ray drove back toward the city hospital, a weight lifted from his shoulders, only to be replaced immediately by a new one. The hardest part was done, but the consequences were just beginning. How long before the police identified him? Days, hours? Ray decided to go directly to the hospital rather than returning to his apartment. Every moment with Lily now was precious, and he couldn't risk missing any of them if the police came for him sooner rather than later. In Lily's room, he found Dr. Chen checking her vitals. "Good news," she said when she saw him. "Boston has confirmed they can take Lily day after tomorrow. The payment is being processed as we speak." Ray felt a rush of relief so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. "Thank you, doctor." "For everything." Dr. Chen smiled. "I'm just doing my job. You're the one who moved mountains to make this happen." She lowered her voice. "Whatever you did to find the money, Mr. Donovan, I hope it works out." The knowing look in her eyes suggested she suspected something wasn't quite right about his sudden financial solution. But her concern was for Lily, not the source of Ray's money. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Lily's condition stabilized enough for transfer, and Ray spent every possible moment by her side, reading her favorite stories, watching cartoons, and making plans for all the things they would do when she was better. If Lily noticed the tension in her father's shoulders, or the way he kept glancing at the hospital room door, she didn't mention it. On the morning Lily was scheduled to be transferred to Boston, Ray arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. A small suitcase packed with Lily's things. He had slept at the motel again, too nervous to return home. The news reports about the Harrington break-in continued, but so far, there had been no mention of a suspect. As Ray approached Lily's room, he noticed 2 men in suits speaking with Dr. Chen at the nurse's station. His instincts immediately went on high alert. They weren't hospital administrators. Their posture and alertness screamed law enforcement. Ray ducked into a supply closet, his heart pounding. Through the narrow opening he left in the door, he watched as Dr. Chen pointed down the hall toward Lily's room. The men nodded and headed in that direction. They were looking for him. They had connected the dots somehow. Ray's mind raced. If he ran now, he might evade capture temporarily, but Lily was about to be transferred to Boston. He couldn't risk her treatment being delayed or canceled because her father was a fugitive. Taking a deep breath, Ray stepped out of the closet and walked directly toward the men, who were now standing outside Lily's room, peering through the window at the small girl watching morning cartoons. "Gentlemen," Ray said quietly, "I believe you're looking for me." The taller of the 2 men turned. "Raymond Donovan?" "Yes, Detective Wilson, City Police." The man showed his badge. "We'd like to ask you some questions about your whereabouts the night before last." Ray nodded, resigned. "I understand, but my daughter is being transferred to Boston today for life-saving treatment. Could we possibly do this after she's safely on her way?" "I don't want to frighten her." The detectives exchanged glances. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mr. Donovan," said the second detective. "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the break-in at the Harrington estate." Ray's shoulders slumped. "May I at least say goodbye to my daughter?" "Please." After a moment's hesitation, Detective Wilson nodded. 2 minutes. "We'll be right outside." Ray entered Lily's room with a smile he didn't feel. "Hey, sunshine. How are you feeling today?" "Lily Bree, it sure is." Ray sat on the edge of her bed, taking her small hand in his. "The doctors there are going to make you all better. Aren't you coming with me?" Lily's brow furrow squeezed her hand. "I have to take Kari." The county courthouse was a hive of activity as Ray was led in for his bail hearing 3 days after his arrest. The case had captured public attention, with news vans parked outside and reporters shouting questions as officers escorted him up the stone steps. Ray kept his head down, the weight of the shackles on his wrists and ankles a constant reminder of how far he had fallen. Inside the courtroom, Catherine Reynolds was already waiting, her sleek briefcase open on the defense table. She nodded to Ray as he was brought in, her expression giving nothing away. Over the past days, she had visited Ray several times, building his defense case with methodical precision, but still refusing to reveal who had hired her. "How's Lily?" Ray asked immediately. It was his first question every time. "Stable," Catherine replied. "The treatment has begun, and her doctors are cautiously optimistic. Nurse Nancy reports that she asks about you constantly." Ray closed his eyes briefly, relief washing over him. "Thank you." The courtroom began to fill. Local residents, drawn by the sensational story, took seats in the gallery. Reporters scribbled in notebooks or tapped on phones. Ray noticed Detective Wilson slip in at the back, watching with professional interest. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Martinez," the bailiff called, and everyone stood as a stern-faced woman in black robes entered and took her place at the bench. The proceedings began with the formal reading of charges: breaking and entering, theft of property exceeding $1 million, and various related offenses. Ray listened with a growing sense of unreality. Stated in the dry language of the law, his desperate act to save his daughter sounded cold and calculated. "How does the defendant plead?" Judge Martinez asked. Catherine stood. "Your Honor, at this time we enter a plea of not guilty." Ray shot her a surprised look. They had discussed this. He had insisted on pleading guilty, on taking responsibility for what he had done. The judge continued, "We're here to determine bail. Given the substantial nature of the theft and the defendant's clear ties to the community, I'd like to hear arguments." The prosecutor, a young man with slicked-back hair and an eager expression, rose. "Your Honor, the state requests bail be denied. Mr. Donovan has demonstrated both the ability and willingness to commit sophisticated crimes. The stolen property has not been recovered, as it was converted to cash and used to pay for medical treatment. We consider him a significant flight risk." Catherine Reynolds stood next, straightening her jacket. "Your Honor, my client has no prior criminal record. He has deep ties to this community. He's lived here his entire life except for his military service. His daughter is currently receiving life-saving treatment in Boston, funded by the money he took, which he has already pledged to repay. Mr. Donovan left a signed note to that effect in Mr. Harrington's safe." The judge looked thoughtful. "While I appreciate the unusual circumstances, Mr. Donovan, the law doesn't create exceptions for noble intentions. $2 million is a substantial theft regardless of purpose. Your Honor," Catherine continued, "we request reasonable bail. My client poses no threat to the community. He's a devoted father whose sole concern is his daughter's well-being." Judge Martinez seemed about to respond when a stir at the back of the courtroom drew everyone's attention. The heavy doors opened, and a tall, silver-haired man in an immaculate suit entered, flanked by two serious-looking men who were clearly security personnel. A murmur swept through the gallery as people recognized the newcomer. Even the judge looked surprised. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, clearly flustered, "that's Victor Harrington." The billionaire made his way down the center aisle with unhurried confidence. His security team remained at the back as he approached the front of the courtroom. "Your Honor," he said in a deep, cultured voice, "I apologize for the interruption, but I believe I have relevant information regarding this case." Judge Martinez recovered her composure. "Mr. Harrington, this is unusual, but given that you're the victim in this case, the court will hear you. Please approach." Victor Harrington moved to stand before the bench. He was older than he appeared in photographs, Ray noticed, with lines of experience etched around his eyes and mouth, but there was a vitality about him, an unmistakable presence that filled the room. "Your Honor," Harrington began, "I've come to withdraw my complaint against Mr. Donovan." The courtroom erupted in whispers. The prosecutor half rose from his seat, then sank back down, clearly unsure how to proceed. Ray stared at the billionaire's back, unable to process what was happening. Judge Martinez raised a hand for silence. "Mr. Harrington, while the court appreciates your input, criminal charges are brought by the state, not by individuals. You can't simply withdraw them." "I understand, Your Honor," Harrington nodded, "but perhaps I can provide context that might influence how the state wishes to proceed." He turned slightly, his gaze meeting Ray's for the first time. There was no anger there, which surprised Ray. Instead, he saw something that looked almost like respect. "Mr. Donovan broke into my home and opened my safe," Harrington continued, turning back to the judge. "These are facts. But he took only what he needed to save his daughter's life, not a penny more despite having access to much greater sums. He left a note promising repayment. He didn't act out of greed but out of desperation. The judge's expression remained neutral. While that may speak to Mr. Donovan's character, it doesn't change the fact that serious crimes were committed. Of course. Harrington nodded. But there's more to consider. My own investigation into Mr. Donovan's background revealed a man of exemplary character. A military veteran with an honorable discharge. A security specialist with an unblemished professional record. A single father struggling to keep his daughter alive in a system that failed them both. He paused, looking around the courtroom. I've been fortunate in my life, Your Honor. Very fortunate. The amount Mr. Donovan took represents less than 1 day's interest on my investments. His daughter's life, however, is beyond value, something I understand all too well. The courtroom was completely silent now, everyone hanging on Harrington's words. Even the judge seemed captivated. After reading Mr. Donovan's note and investigating his circumstances, I've come to a decision, Harrington continued. I don't wish to see him incarcerated. Instead, I propose an alternative. He turned to face Ray directly. Mr. Donovan, I'm establishing a new foundation focused on helping children with rare diseases. Children like your daughter. I need someone with your skills to head security for this foundation. The position comes with a salary that would allow you to repay what you took over time, while remaining present in your daughter's life as she recovers. Ray stared at Harrington, certain he had misheard. The billionaire was offering him a job, after he had broken into the man's home and stolen from him? Your Honor, the prosecutor interjected, finding his voice. This is highly irregular. The defendant committed serious crimes. Against me, Harrington cut in smoothly. And I'm choosing to respond with rehabilitation rather than punishment. Isn't that the ideal outcome of our justice system? Judge Martinez studied Harrington thoughtfully. Mr. Prosecutor, given these unusual circumstances, what is the state's position? The young prosecutor looked torn. Going against someone of Harrington's influence was career suicide, but dropping charges entirely went against his instincts. The state would be willing to consider a substantial reduction in charges, Your Honor. Perhaps a guilty plea to a lesser offense with probation, community service, and restitution. Catherine Reynolds saw her opening. Your Honor, my client would be amenable to such terms, particularly if the probation allowed him to travel to Boston to be with his daughter during her treatment. Judge Martinez looked at Ray. Mr. Donovan, do you understand what's being proposed here? You would still have a criminal record, but you would avoid incarceration? Ray stood, his legs unsteady. Yes, Your Honor, I understand. He turned to Harrington, struggling to find words. Mr. Harrington, I don't know what to say. I broke into your home. I took your property. Why would you do this? Harrington's expression softened slightly. 20 years ago, Mr. Donovan, my wife was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. We had all the money in the world, but the treatments available weren't enough. I would have broken any law, violated any principle to save her. His voice grew quieter. I failed. You have a chance I didn't. Take it. Ray nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Judge Martinez cleared her throat. We'll take a brief recess while the prosecutor and defense counsel work out the details of a plea agreement. Mr. Donovan will remain in custody until those terms are finalized. She banged her gavel, and the courtroom began to buzz with conversation. As Ray was led back to the holding area, he caught a final glimpse of Victor Harrington speaking quietly with Catherine Reynolds. The billionaire's expression was serious but not unkind. For the first time since his arrest, Ray felt a flicker of hope. The next few hours past Icon will be released today. You can fly to Boston, Tom. 3 years had passed since the night Ray Donovan broke into Victor Harrington's safe. The morning sun streamed through the windows of a modern office building on the edge of the city, casting warm light across Ray's desk. Photos lined the wall behind him. Lily at her dance recital, Lily on her first day back at school, Lily and Ray feeding ducks at the park. Each image a milestone, a victory against the disease that had nearly taken her. Ray glanced at his watch and closed the security report he'd been reviewing. He had a meeting with Victor in 10 minutes. Even after all this time, he sometimes found it surreal that he now worked alongside the man he had once robbed. The Harrington Children's Health Foundation occupied the top 3 floors of the building. From Ray's office, he could see the city spread out below, the hospital where Lily had spent so many painful months visible in the distance. A lifetime ago, it seemed. "Dad, did you see my test score?" Lily burst into the office, her backpack bouncing against her back, a paper clutched triumphantly in her hand. At 12, she was all long limbs and boundless energy, her previous illness visible only in the regular checkup still marked on the family calendar. Ray took the paper, grinning at the A+ circled in red at the top. "Science genius strikes again. That's amazing, sunshine. Ms. Parker says I should consider medicine as a career." Lily flopped into the chair across from Ray's desk. "Maybe pediatric research like Dr. Chen does now." "You'd be brilliant at it," Ray said, meaning every word. Lily's experience had given her both empathy and determination beyond her years. "Ready for lunch with Victor?" Lily nodded eagerly. She had formed an unlikely bond with the billionaire, who treated her with the same seriousness he afforded adults. "Is he still taking us to the new research wing after?" "That's the plan." Ray stood and grabbed his jacket. "We're meeting him at the Foundation Cafe in 5 minutes. They walked together through the bustling office. Staff members smiled and greeted Lily by name. She was something of a mascot for the foundation, though few knew the full story of how it had come to exist. Victor had been careful to protect both Ray and Lily from the media attention that had eventually faded as newer scandals took center stage. The foundation's cafe occupied a sunny corner of the top floor. It was Victor's concession to work-life balance, a place where staff could relax and recharge. As Ray and Lily entered, they spotted Victor at a corner table, his silver hair catching the light, his attention focused on a tablet in front of him. "Victor," Lily called, hurrying over. Professional decorum was not her strong suit. The billionaire looked up, his usually serious face warming with a smile. "Lily, right on time." He rose to greet them, shaking Ray's hand and accepting Lily's enthusiastic hug with the slightly awkward air of someone who hadn't grown up with physical affection, but was learning to appreciate it. "I got an A+ on my science project," Lily announced as they sat down. "The one about blood disorders and new treatments." "Excellent work," Victor said with genuine approval. "Perhaps you'll present it at our next board meeting." "We could use your expertise." Lily beamed at being taken seriously. "I'd need to add some slides about the foundation's work too." "A comprehensive approach. I like it." Victor signaled for service, then turned to Ray. "How's the Seattle expansion coming along?" "On schedule," Ray replied. "Security systems will be fully operational 2 weeks before opening. I've hired a local team, all vetted according to our protocols." Victor nodded, satisfied. "Good. We can't afford any vulnerabilities. Not with the sensitive data we'll be handling." Ray suppressed a smile at the irony of the man he'd robbed now, trusting him with security for a multi-million-dollar operation. Life took strange turns. After they ordered, Victor set his tablet aside, his expression growing more thoughtful. "I've been meaning to discuss something with both of you. The foundation is approaching its 3-year mark." Ray nodded. He was well aware of the significance. 3 years of probation completed, 3 years of steady repayments from his salary, 3 years since Lily had begun her treatment. "I've been keeping track." "As of next month," Victor continued, "your restitution will be officially complete. Every dollar repaid with interest." A weight Ray had carried for 3 years seemed to lift slightly from his shoulders. He had insisted on repaying the full amount, despite Victor's initial suggestion that they consider it an investment in the foundation. Some debts needed to be cleared, not forgiven. "That calls for a celebration," Lily declared, oblivious to the deeper currents of the conversation. Victor smiled at her enthusiasm. "Indeed it does. But it also means it's time for some decisions." He turned his keen gaze to Ray. "Your position at the foundation was initially linked to the restitution agreement. With that obligation fulfilled, you're free to pursue other opportunities if you wish." Ray hadn't expected this conversation today. He glanced at Lily, happily studying the dessert menu, then back at Victor. "Are you asking if I plan to leave?" "I'm asking what you want, Ray." Victor leaned forward slightly. "You've built our security division from the ground up. It's now one of the most effective operations of its kind. The skills that once made you a successful thief have made you an equally successful protector." Their food arrived. Momentarily pausing the conversation, Lily dug into her pasta, half listening to the adults while texting a friend under the table. "I don't want to leave," Ray said once the server had departed. "What we're doing here, it matters. Every family we help, every child who gets treatment they couldn't otherwise afford. It's like saving Lily all over again." Victor seemed pleased but not surprised by this answer. "I was hoping you'd say that. In fact, I have a proposal." He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. "The foundation is expanding. We're moving beyond just funding treatments to advocating for systemic change in how rare diseases are researched and treated. I'd like you to head a new division, one focused on identifying and helping families before they reach the breaking point you did." Ray opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. It outlined a new role, Director of Family Advocacy and Support Services, with a substantial increase in responsibility and compensation. "You have a unique perspective, Ray," Victor continued. "You understand both security and desperation. You know what drives a good person to cross lines they never thought they would. That insight is invaluable." Ray thought about the families he'd already worked with over the past 3 years. He'd developed an intuitive ability to identify those on the edge. Parents whose determined smiles couldn't hide their growing desperation, who were beginning to consider unthinkable options as their children worsened and options dwindled. "We've helped over 100 families so far," Victor said quietly, "but there are thousands more out there facing the same impossible choices you did. With this new division, we could reach them before they're forced to take drastic measures." Lily, who had been pretending not to listen, looked up from her phone. "You should do it, Dad. You always know when the parents are really scared, even when they're trying to act brave." Ray smiled at his daughter's perceptiveness. "You think so?" "Definitely." Lily twirled pasta on her fork. "Plus, I heard Nurse Nancy saying you're the only person besides the doctors who really understands what the families are going through." Nancy had become the Foundation's head of patient care coordination after Lily's recovery, her practical compassion making her perfect for the role. "High praise indeed," Victor said with a hint of amusement. "Nancy doesn't impress easily." Ray closed the folder, his decision already made. "I'll need to build a team, people with both clinical and social work backgrounds, and we'll want to coordinate with hospital financial services departments. They're often the first to recognize when families are running out of options." Victor nodded, pleased. "I thought you might have some ideas already. Draw up a proposal, and we'll discuss funding parameters next week." They finished lunch discussing lighter topics: Lily's upcoming school play, the Foundation's annual fundraising gala, a new treatment protocol showing promising results in clinical trials. As they were about to leave for their tour of the research wing, Victor's phone buzzed. "Excuse me," he said, checking the message. "It appears we have a situation that requires attention." He looked up at Ray, his expression turning serious. "The Miller family in Phoenix. Father lost his job last month due to missing work for his son's treatments. They've just received notice that their insurance coverage is being terminated." Ray immediately recognized the name. The Millers had a 6-year-old son with a condition similar to what Lily had battled. They'd been on Ray's watch list, but their situation had deteriorated faster than anticipated. "How bad?" Ray asked, already reaching for his phone. "Final notice on their apartment. Treatment bills mounting." Victor's voice held a rare edge of anger. "The hospital is suggesting they explore other options for continued care." Ray had heard those words himself, had felt the helplessness they inspired. "I'll call them immediately. We can expedite emergency funding and get legal working on the insurance appeal." Lily, sensing the shift in mood, looked between the two men. "Is it a kid like me?" Ray and Victor exchanged a look of perfect understanding. This was why